let's get into it. So in Excel, sometimes we need to manipulate our test. We need to perform some basic functions like, joining two tests. Sometimes you can give out a form, and the people that fill your form, they probably fill their name starting with a small letter or just some inconsistencies like that. And you need to get rid of that to make your data consistent. So we can do that in Excel. Excel allows us to do that with little or no stress. So we are going to be looking at that at this time. Okay. So here I have a list of names. This was gotten from one of I think ALX challenge they held a week or 2 weeks ago. So we have a couple of names here, but one thing about it is that the names are written all in small letter. So we want to perform some basic functions to see how we can manipulate this name and just do different kind of manipulations to it to arrive at what we want in each particular case. So I'm going to be starting out with the function proper in Excel. In Excel, for text manipulation, there's a function called proper, P-R-O-P-E-R. So the work of the proper function is just, to capitalize the first letter of a word. So for instance, if I say I apply the proper function on this first name, Imana, what it will do for me is that it will turn the first letter of the name, it will make it capital letter. So whenever I want to write anything in sentence case, right, what I'll do is apply the function proper on it. Once I apply the function proper, it turns the first letter of that to a capital letter. So I can apply the function for all others now. I see that the function is now replicated over the other rows. Then we have the function upper in Excel, the function upper. So the work of the function upper is basically, to turn everything in that cell you selected into capital letter. So everything is going to be block case. Unlike proper that turns only the first letter, upper is going to turn everything in block case. So if I come and I apply the function upper for first name, what I will get is Emma, all in block case. So I hope you can see that on your end. So the function upper typically makes the cell all capital letter. That's what it does. Okay. So I'm going to try to run the same function proper again for the last name so that we can have the last name in a proper format. Because when you write your names, when you are filling a form and you're writing your names, you are expected that the first letter of your name should be in capital letter. So I'm going to correct that for the last name too. So let me say the function proper for last name. And we can see Amarachi is starting now with a capital A instead of the small a that started it in the first case. So this is the use of the function upper and the function proper. So we are going to be going a step higher. We want to concatenate. We want to join the first name and the last name together to get the full name. Like we know that the first name, the combination of the first name and the last name, then if there is a middle name in some cases, the combination of all this gives us the full name of an individual. So what do I do? How do I join Emma and Amarachi together to give us a full name, right? So let's look into that. So I will do it using a symbol first, because there are two ways to go about it. I will do it using a symbol first. Then after that, I will do it using a function in Excel. There is a function in Excel that allows you to perform that particular function. So the way of doing it with a symbol, if we want to concatenate two strings, what do? We pick the first string. Once we input our equal to sign, that tells Excel we are trying to write an equation. We click the first cell, then we input the AND. Once we input AND, we input the second cell. Once we do this and click enter, it gives us the name joined together. But then when we look at it, nobody writes their names like this. Firstly, they are all in lowercase. And secondly, there is no space in between them. You don't want your name written like this. If you are to fill a form, you want your name written in a proper way, in a way that people can separate that, okay, this is your first name and the other is your last name. So what we'll do is we'll do that again. But this time, we are using our proper first name, just like we use in filling forms, right? So once we click our proper first name, we had our hand normally. Then we put in a space. How do we put in a space? We put a quotation mark and we had a space in between it. So once we put space in between our quotation mark, we are telling Excel to put a string of space between the two cells we want to input. Then we input our last name. Okay, sorry about that. So once we do that, we put our hand again, then we input our last name. So once we input our last name and click on enter, we can see that the name is in the format we want it to be. We have our first name, we have a space, a character of a space in between, then we have the last name. The first name starting with a capital letter, and the last name also starting with a capital letter. So what I will do is I will double click here when the cross is black so that I can repeat the function for all other rows. Like I said, there are two ways about it. So the other way to do this is simple. It's just to use a function concatenate. There's a built-in function in Excel that can help you join these things together without using the and symbol. It's called the function concatenate. So how do we use the function concatenate? We simply say equal to, then we input the function, which is concatenate. So once we say concatenate, we select the first cell, that is the cell that contains our first value. Then we input a comma. Once we input a comma, we input our space like we did the other time in quotation mark. Never forget the quotation mark. It's very important. By the quotation mark, you are telling Excel that you want to put a string of space in that place. So after doing that, you can input your comma, then input your last name. So once you do this, Excel gives you the name. So you'll be getting the same answer. It does not matter any of this one you are more conversant with using, you will get the same answer. So then to move us a step further, we are going to be working with a function, the function length. But in Excel, it is called len, L-E-N. What does this do in Excel? The function len, length, L-E-N, helps us, to get the number of strings. That is, this name, Emma Amarachi, I want to count every character in that name. I want to know how long it is. That is what the function len simply does for us. So if I have a name John, for instance, and I run the function len on John, it should give me 4, because that's the count of the total characters we have in that name. So what I'll do is I'll say equal to the function len, then I click on the cell I want to count. Once I click on that, it tells me that the length of the name Emma Amarachi is what? Is 13. Note, Excel counts spaces as characters. So it's going to definitely count the space that is between Emma and Amarachi as a character too. So if I choose to repeat that for the other rows, then I have my answer for the other rows. We also have the function right and left. Right and left, they are all for string manipulation. Very cheap functions, easy to use. So how do we use right? How do we use left? Let me use right in this instance. Or let me use left in this instance, then I'll use right afterwards. The this proper name, Amarachi, for instance, I might say I want to get the first 4 or 5 characters from the left. That's simply what we use the left function for. What I'll just do is I'll say equal to left. I'll select the cell that contains what I want to work on. I'll input comma, and I'll say this is the number of characters I want from the left. For instance, I want 5 characters. That should be Amara, and the she should be left out, right? So once I click enter, I get Amara now, because from the left, Amara is the first 5 characters. So I can choose to do that for the other rows. So for the sake of the right function, let me input another column so that we can see how the right function works. The right function works exactly like the left. But in this case, what you do is you put in your equal to sign, you say right. So once you say right, select the function, which opens a bracket for you. Once you get the bracket, for instance, let me go back to the name. So I'm selecting from the right now. So Excel is going to start counting from I, the I that ends the Amarachi. So I want 3 from the right? So if I say 3, then I'm going to be getting Chi, which is the first 3 characters from the right. So I can choose to replicate for the other cells. Okay, now we are going to be trying to get email for all our staffs. For instance, I worked in an organization in the past, and every staff has email, an official email. And the way it's structured is it's I think your first name, your last name, then the name of the organization .gov.au. So if we want to generate an official email for our staff, let's say in our company, want to generate an official email, what we need to do is just, concatenate. For instance, I wrote a formula out for the email right here. You can see this top part of the screen. Let me make the text bold, maybe bigger too, so we can see. Still fine. So we can see boldly. So I said email equals to the first name of each staff plus the last name of each staff plus at federalgovernmentbank.au. So the federalgovernmentbank.au is like the domain name, and each person, for each person's email, the first name and the last name will come first. So let's try to convert that to email. So what do? We say equals to, let's use our concatenate function here. We can use our hand symbol too. It doesn't change a thing. We get the same thing. So I said first name and last name. Now I'm going to be picking the first name. Then I have to put a comma here. My last name. Remember, there are no spaces in email. So you don't need to put spaces. You just need to continue typing whatever you want to put next. So I'm going to say at Federal Government Bank.au, right? Why I'm inputting the quotation mark is because I'm putting a string after those cells. Anytime you are inputting a string in any data analysis software at all, a string must always be in quotation marks. That's a law. A string must always be in quotation marks, and that was why I imputed the space in between quotation marks the other time. So if I choose to click enter now, you see what I have? So I have Emma Amarachi at federalgovernmentbank.au. Now, if I choose to replicate for others, I will have the same thing. So for instance, here I have Yusuf Yakubu at, sorry about that. Let me make that red. So I have this. So it does that for each of the cell. Okay. Then let's look at, how to get Let me make a copy of this so it can be directly on my my eyes can see it. So let's make let's say we want to make username, for instance. Okay. Let's say you want to make username, for instance, for every of our staff. And I said username equals to first name plus leftmost 3 characters of the last name plus the staff ID. So each staff will come and register on maybe the website, and you want to, give them an automatic username, for instance. So this is what you do. You say equal to, we input our concatenate. So we come in here, we select the first name. We select the first name, comma. Now, the formula I gave us was first name plus leftmost 3 characters of the last name. So that means definitely we are going to be using the function left here. So I will come here and say my function left, because I want to pick the first 3 characters from the last name. So I'll come back here, I'll select my last name. How many characters do I want from it? I want just 3. So once I select 3, then I can input my comma. Then what else do I want? I want my ID for each person. So for Emma, she has ID 1, right? So I'm going to input my ID. And once I click on enter, can we see I have the username? So the username is Emma, Ama. Ama is coming from Amarachi, right? So I have Emma, Ama 1. So if I choose to replicate that for my other guys, I will have their first name too and their last name, then their ID. So it goes on. And remember, the ID is a primary key because it is unique for every person. For instance, there are no 2 staffs that have the same ID. So definitely the username is going to be unique for each person. Okay. Okay. So that's that on concatenation and working with strings. So if we have questions now, please let them come in. Let me see if you have questions, any concerns concerning what we just did. Are you guys there?
I'm just joining the class now.
Okay. If you are just joining the class, no problem. There will be a video of everything we are doing here. You can watch that later. Because of the time, we won't be able to go back to things we have.
Yes. I know. All right.
Okay, thank you. God bless. Is there any other person? Anything that is not clear, please? So I can touch it before we move on. Because I think we'll be building on this from here. Any other person? Any other thing? Okay. If there are no questions coming in, let's look further. For instance, let me just make this. Okay. Okay. For instance, we have our data like this. I'm just don't mind the length of my data. You could have as many data in a column as you want, but just for us to grasp the concept, so I'm using this. If we have location like this contains, for instance, a city name and the name of the state where the city is located. So many times you want to get the city out of the location name. You want to isolate the city from the state name. Maybe at the end, you want to be able to aggregate how many people are attending this program from Ikeja, Lagos, how many people are attending this program from Ojo, Lagos, how many people are attending this program from different places in Lagos. So you really want to separate this city from the state, or the town from the state, depending on how you want to use it. There's Excel allows you to be able to separate them. So what you do is just select your data, select data you want to separate. And what you have to do is, come to your data bar. Then you say split text to columns, split text to columns. Once you come to split text to columns, what's separating both of them? I mean, the two things you want to separate, it's a comma, right? Okay, I think I used comma the last time, so my own is still on comma. So once I select comma, it splits them based on comma. So you see that in this table now, Ikeja is splitted from Lagos already, or is splitted from Delta, and Ibadan is splitted from Oyo State. So once I enter, automatically, it separates them for me. So I can now decide to say this is probably the city, then this is the state. So now I can now from here aggregate my data for Ikeja, for instance, or for Warri, for instance, or for Ibadan, for instance, and get the count of people coming from each location. So I just wanted to add that, since it's also a way of working with text, data in text form. Okay, so let's move on.